Hey YouTube, this is Doug, and I thought I would take a moment to share something I learned. This is dedicated to all the forums that I've ever been to get great ideas from and never have the time to contribute. I spent a great deal of time trying to figure out what was going on with my son's '09 Mustang 4.0. And what I've come to learn is that no one on YouTube that I could find knew what was going on. And it's kind of a complicated thing to solve, but it's much easier now that you know what you need to do. So if you're having a problem with timing chain noise, or you're having a problem with low oil pressure, which I had both, I think I may have the solution. You'll see here in a moment what years this will cover and what cars, according to Ford. But initially, when you hear that sound, you start thinking that perhaps it's lifters collapsing. Well, you don't have lifters in this particular motor because it's an overhead valve, or cam, overhead cam, I'm sorry. So you can forget the lifter noise. The second thing you start thinking about is possibly it's the cassettes or the tighteners, the tensioners on the timing chains. This particular motor has two timing chains, one for each bank or each head. There's a chain on the left side of the motor, that's the driver's side, that goes from the crank up to the cam. On the right side, that same chain is on the back of the motor. So that's a real mother. And if you don't know, just count your blessings that you don't. I don't think it's either one of those things in your case, and here's where I would start looking. Here you see the Ford pump. This is actually off of their website, and I want to draw your attention down here to the fact that this is for the Explorer, or the Exploder, the Mountaineer, the Explorer Sport Track, the Mustang, the Ranger, 4.0, 2001, 2011. Now, verify that this is the right pump in your car before you start assuming that this may be your issue, because it's a big project and you definitely want to know if you're in the right direction before you get started. So here's your model number for the pump, and I don't know how accurate this price is. You know, we're looking at mid-June 2019, so it may change. But what I'm going to show you here, so let me cover a little bit about, and I apologize for the low quality of this video, but I don't have a lot of time, and I definitely want to get this information out there. What my son was experiencing was his oil pressure gauge was low, and he would get a warning light. At the same time, his timing chain started making a lot of noise. It started sounding a little bit like a tractor. And we put in some additives, and that helped a little. And then we started looking into the tensioner, and I actually replaced the tensioner, which was $50 or $60 or something. And heck, I think that was from the parts store. It wasn't even actually the Ford part. But when I called the Ford dealer and asked for the part, and they said they didn't have it in stock, I should have known right there, this is not the problem. They would have this in stock because this is a common problem, and no one seems to understand what it is. Well, let me show you what's going on. This is that same pump you just saw in the drawing, and you can see this right here piece. At first glance, you think, well, that must be normal. That's supposed to be the way it is. But what I found out is it's not. In fact, when we first took it apart, this is a plastic pickup tube, and it was all bolted down. I've just set it on here real quick because halfway through the project I realized I'm going to need to share this information. So I wish I'd taken some video and some better pictures, but I think it'll be self-explanatory. Now imagine there's a bolt here. There's a bolt here. You can see the hole that it goes in. And across the way here, there's another bolt. When we first took it out, you couldn't see this gap. There was no way to know there was a gap here. It didn't look bright, but, you know, it's a part. It's probably fine. So we actually stuck it in a bucket with the pickup tube, which is over here. The screen's over here. And spun it with the drive shaft. You know, there's a drive shaft that runs from the cam, the main cam, which I won't even get into it. But anyway, there's a whole nother cam in the motor that drives the drive shaft for the oil pump. I don't think it actually does anything else. So we put the drive shaft into the pump. We ran it with a drill, and it would be sucking oil, but sucking air, and that doesn't make sense, right? It shouldn't suck air if the screen is completely submerged. That made us start realizing we had a problem, and this was our problem. As we took it apart, and when you take yours apart, if you get to this point, there's a metal collar in each spot for the bolt to go through, and the metal collars were actually pulling through. I've already fixed them here. But it was an indication that something was up, and then when we saw that, that's when we knew. That must be the problem. So we took it to the vise, and I wouldn't recommend doing it this way, only because I don't want to be responsible. But basically what we did, this is one jaw of the vise. This is the other jaw. We put a flat piece of aluminum bar across here and just gently push the piece back in. Okay, I wish I had another picture to show you. But basically what's happened is the pressure of the oil going in this hole here backs up. And that sleeve that you saw right here, okay, there's a hole that goes through it, but it's capped on one end. So what ends up happening is that becomes pressurized and it starts pushing out of this housing, which creates this gap, and this part's not submerged in the oil. Okay, this is actually turned. Let me see if I can change the direction here. Okay, this is actually how it would be in the car. And the oil level is actually below the screen level. So that tube goes down a couple of inches. The gap you see there, this gap, turn the screen, I can't work the cursor. This gap right here actually starts sucking air. And if you've ever had a cracked straw in a drink, especially like a milkshake, forget about it. You're not getting any drink. You're going to be getting a lot of air. So let's turn this back the way it's supposed to be. All right. So we pressed it back in with the vise very slowly. Do not hit it with a hammer. That's not going to help you out. It's going to make it swell. It's not going to go in all the way, and you're going to be stuck with the problem. This is that tube again. It ends way down here. But what I'm showing you here is after we pressed it back in and we tapped those metal collars that go around these bolts. These are the same bolts, okay? And that raised portion where the shaft's coming out is right here. And actually, it's from about here to about here. And what had happened was, because of the pressure of the oil, the pump, which you want to say replace the pump. Well, there's nothing wrong with the pump. Clearly, it's pushing the metal shaft through the plastic. The pump's fine. What's wrong is the design. They needed something here, a metal collar or something across here, a bridge that would keep that thing from being able to back out. So what I've done is I put washers on here. The washers do two things. They keep the plastic from sliding up off the collared, what would you call them, shims or whatever, that go around the bolt so that the plastic can't just slide up the bolt. It also, in this case, I've got the washer offset to where it's actually overlapping the place where that part that backed out. Go back. See this right here? There's a bolt here. There's a bolt here. We're looking at it from the top down this way. And this round section now has a bolt with a washer that kind of overlaps that area. Okay, and the metal collar's in here and the washer's on top. It's holding the plastic down on the collar, and it extends over far enough that it keeps that shaft from being able to come back out. As soon as we did this, we put it back into the oil with the drive shaft, ran the pump, and it works fantastic. Okay, now for folks who think you have to take the motor out in order to do this, you don't. And I'm proving it right here. We did it, and here's the documentation of that. You do have to take the oil pan apart. It's a two-piece oil pan. It has a bottom piece. I don't have it illustrated here, but there's a whole bottom panel to this. In fact, you can see right here that it's not covered. That cover goes here, and you have to take that off to get the screen, which is going to be trapped inside. And actually, I think the screen needs to be put on afterwards. It does. So you have to take this pan off. Then you can unbolt the screen from the motor. or from the pump with those 3 bolts. Then you can drop this other pan and get to the pump. Let me show you something. All right, now you're looking at the driver's side. Oh no, I'm lying to you. The passenger side of the vehicle. This is where the transmission is. This is the back of the engine. Obviously, this is where your oil filter goes. This is where the pump bolts up to. You have to kind of snake it in this hole, drop it down in there, and then go back up and bolt it. And torque it. Don't forget to torque it. And don't forget to put your drive shaft back in it. Fortunately, I didn't forget to do any of those things, but I've forgotten enough of those kinds of things to make me really think hard before I move forward. While you have this pan off, take a look and try and wiggle your connecting rods and make sure that everything seems good. You don't have anything loose. Check your pan, make sure there's no grime or anything in it. It's a great time to inspect how the motor's been performing and look for potential problems. Once you get the oil pump back together, which by the way, it has a great O-ring in that pickup, so you don't even need a gasket or anything. Really, you do not need any of those things. You don't need anything except time and some patience. Oh, and you do need another thing. You need a block of wood, because in order to get this thing out, you have to jack the motor up, okay? And you can see here, we're using the jack from the car. Not that I don't have plenty of jacks, but very few that are that short. And this actually worked out great. You can see I'm catching both sides of this motor mount here, and I raised it up. What we did was we raised up one side. So you have to take 2 nuts loose. On each side of the motor, there's a nut that holds the mounts down to this rubber mount. And I guess this is technically a bracket. This is the mount, but there'll be a nut that goes down on top of that and holds it down. So you raise up one side, take off both nuts, raise up one side, stick a 3/4 inch shim in here, take your jack back out. You can see here we're running it with an impact and a socket on there. We had to take the handle off, and you can do that by just tapping on it with a hammer where they sort of smash it to make it too big to go back through the hole it came out of. You just tap on it and pull it through, and then you can use your jack. It's much more useful, actually. What we ended up doing was putting a cotter pin back in the handle. So we put the handle back through it, put a cotter key in it, and now it can be left on or removed, depending. But hopefully, you'll never need a jack. You only have to replace oil pumps on this car, apparently. So you lift up one side 3/4 of an inch. Go to the other side, lift it up 1.5 inches. This is 1.5 inch block of wood, obviously. And then come back to the original side and raise this side up. That's how we did it. There's only a couple things you need to be worried about there. Number one, the bottom of this jack, whatever you put it on, make sure you're not damaging anything. You're not putting the weight of the motor on your steering rack. Make sure you're on your cross member. So we had a block of wood down there as well to elevate the surface of the cross member high enough that the jack wouldn't have any pressure on the steering rack. The second thing you need to be concerned about is clearance at the back of the motor. You don't want to lift the motor up so much that it actually crushes things at the back. Now, this is an 09 Mustang. 05 to 09 are the same basic car. If you're dealing with any other vehicle, you may have other things you have to deal with. But bear in mind, if you can figure out that it is an oil pump problem, this is almost certainly your solution. Or the timing chain noise, same exact thing. We didn't buy any parts. We didn't buy any washers. We didn't buy any gaskets. We bought nothing. Once we bought the tensioner and that didn't work, then we realized we have a different kind of problem, and everything else after that. So you don't need to worry about buying anything for this car. For this particular motor, the oil pan, sorry, the oil pans have O-rings. It's really great. I do have a lot of respect for Ford, although they have their issues like everyone else, and they are fun to pick on. So there you go. You jack it up, put your blocks in here. Be careful you don't get yourself hurt. Make sure that when you put your oil pump back on, you torque it. Make sure when you put your oil pan back on, you torque it. There's 2 different kinds of bolts there. There's the bolts that go on the outside of the pan. There's also main bolts that go into the caps on the motor. It's not worth explaining, but there's some big bolts there. You'll need to torque those as well. And that's it. Now here's my son working on that same car, and I thought it'd be fun to just share some pictures with y'all. If you got everything you need, then good luck, and come back and visit me some more. But if you want, I'm going to show you some pictures of my kid. He's working on his car here. I was very proud of him. Put a lot of time and effort into this thing. He didn't just get a check or have mom and dad buy him a nice car. He worked hard and he earned it. Of course, when you work hard, you take care of things. And I encourage everyone to let their kids get involved and do that sort of stuff. But as you'll see here in a moment, that doesn't guarantee success, although the car's looking good there, right? Very proud of him. There's my daughter working all hours of the night and just thrilled to death to have that car done, right? Well, accidents happen. Yeah. It wasn't very long after, and it was a pretty minor accident, but it did a lot of cosmetic damage, as you can see. So while he took his girlfriend and my car on a date that night, I thought, I'll have a little fun with him and send him this picture. And then that car, which used to be called the Bull because we had so much trouble with it, it was as stubborn as a bull, and of course that's a popular song on the radio at the time. I guess we should have renamed it Frankenstein at this point, where we started just scabbing pieces together, because I told him, if you're going to wad up your car every 6 months, we're not going to be just putting brand new parts on this thing. And we just scabbed her together. There he is. He ain't as happy there, is he? But it wasn't too much longer, and she was back together, looking good. Need a little bit of grill stuff here, right? And there she is. Well, good luck, everybody, and if you need anything, you can leave a message or whatever. I'll try and help you out. And that's it.